All right, so Natalie, while Coop is letting people in, I will tell you a little bit about the audience. So we have the Nerdwise team, some customers, some friends, good chance there's some other founders, entrepreneurs. I know that other folks are going to be watching this at a later date. Potentially some folks from the old People Links days will be here. We did get some registrations from that group. But in terms of the format, I'd love to do like 20 or 30 minutes of catching up. I'm going to introduce you in my own words really quickly, and then you can follow that up with a more complete introduction. And then after like 20 or 30 minutes of conversation, we will open it up for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to jump in. Cooper, are we good in the waiting room? Cool, you're muted, but I saw some body language. All right, so this is a very exciting introduction for me to make. It's actually the first time introducing Natalie for me, but it is very safe to say that Natalie that this woman is the one who really helped take my career to the next level and really got me here where I am today and working with all the great folks here at Nerdwise. So the story between me and Natalie really quickly is that a few weeks after I left LinkedIn, I got an email introduction. At the time, Natalie went by Nathan, which is another part of the story that I'm sure we'll touch on. And then we really built what was the first and probably still, one of the first big, brands in B2B social marketing and helping companies use LinkedIn. That was People Links. I really learned everything from copywriting to quality assurance to like attention to detail, sales, presenting. Like a lot of the skills that I have today really came from Natalie, and she's extremely specific and about quality and kind of what we produced and what we did. And so I just learned a whole lot through that. And then for the last 5 years, while Coop and I have really been working together building Nerdwise, Natalie's been building Translator, which you can talk a little bit more about, but really helping, I think, put some product and software and solutions around diversity and inclusion for the enterprise. So we'll talk about that a little bit, but it's been really about 5 years. I think a lot's changed for both of us, maybe more for you than me. But I would love to say welcome, great to see you. Tell me what I missed. How are you? And yeah, I mean, open up. Tell us how you are.
First of all, thank you, Patrick, and thank you for having me on this platform to share my story today and give some updates to some people. I think two things that I see that have changed for both of us, or at least one right off the bat, is we both have really long hair. So me for different reasons than you. But it's great to connect, like I said, and just to introduce myself to anyone that's on the line that I don't know, or if I haven't seen you in a really long time. My name is Natalie Egan. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, just so you know. I put that in my name on my Zoom little tag, so just as a reminder. And as Patrick said, I'm the founder and CEO of Translator, where we build diversity, equity, and inclusion analytics software for corporations, schools, and nonprofits. It's a cool product. It's actually very similar to People Links, which is really weird. Instead of teaching people social media at scale, we're teaching people empathy at scale, which is kind of an interesting thing for me to go through again, because I never thought we'd build anything like People Links ever again. But in terms of your questions, Patrick, I mean, I'm doing great. It's been quite a journey to get here. About 5 years ago, I came out as a transgender woman, and I think surprised a lot of people in the process, including myself. I didn't know that. I had repressed it my whole life. I thought I did what everybody wanted me to do. I wasn't really who I wanted to be. I wanted to make people happy. And so I became this person for everyone else. And so you can imagine for the last 5 years, it's been really hard to make that shift. there was sort of a skyscraper that I built around my previous identity. And by the way, just for everybody on the call, I would prefer if we just don't use my old name. That's called a dead name. Generally with trans people, you don't want to use it. I'll give Patrick like a little pass on that. But there was a lot of expectations and a whole identity built around my previous life. And, I had to it had to all come crumbling down, and I've had to rebuild it. And it's been really, really hard, but I'm here, and hopefully I'll be around for a long time. And I'm just loving life finally. After 40 years, I'm finally like alive. So it's good to be here.
Awesome. So one of the things that is also kind of parallel to the People Link story is that, you really had an identity in that whole mission and business that was very much like a part of your story. And now I feel like you're building another business out of your, that's very much about your identity and your story as well, or at least you're very good at merging the two of those to make them work. But I mean, I'd love to maybe hear a little bit about like the journey that you've been on with Translator. And I think as part of that, like what is, with business, there's always a problem or an opportunity. I think we know in society, the problems of a lack of diversity, inclusion, awareness, all these things that we see that are systemic and kind of disgusting or across, the United States. But there's that issue, which is of course got kind of like headlines, but what does this mean for like businesses? What does it mean for enterprises that you're working with in terms of their own goals, their own problems, and the opportunity for them to get better at this level of empathy and understanding for their workforce? Like can you just kind of talk a little bit about the story of Translator and then what the impacts are, or where you guys really can, make the magic happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes down to this like very core concept of, I think, new businesses are born out of change, right? Like when something in the market changes, like there's always an opportunity to create something. And I think that's how it becomes so tied to who I am, right? Because I was, so passionate about, social media really, that when I saw changes in the market, when I saw what was going to happen for the B2B market, I had this, because of my experience, working with you at LinkedIn, I saw things that other people couldn't see, right? I could see a future where, it was going to be increasingly challenging for corporations to manage the social media presence of their employees in a way that was a win-win for everybody. So, that's what's happened here again, is there's just great change going on. And whenever there's change, like there's always going to be disruption and markets, and people are going to try and figure out how to adapt to that new normal. And that's what I saw happening here. I mean, a lot of it had to do with my identity. Like when I came out as a trans woman, I always tell people, I experienced bias, discrimination, and hatred for the first time in my life at like age 39. Like I knew what those things were academically or theoretically, but I had never actually experienced them. And that hit me really hard. I'd never had to think about my identity prior to my transition. In fact, I would have confused the word identity with like fingerprints and cybersecurity. Like I wouldn't even know what you were talking about. And all of a sudden my identity became like the thing that dictates my day. Right. Like, and all of a sudden I was kind of hit with that in a way that I'd never experienced. And so I put a stake in the ground and said, look, I'm going to build technology to help solve for this problem of inequality, because I could see it in a whole new way, right? So I was all of a sudden aware of a problem that's been around for a long time, but all of a sudden the sort of tectonic plates started shifting underneath the market as, it became more and more politicized, as corporations were dealing with more and more issues like the Me Too movement, most recently Black Lives Matter. COVID has had a really big impact on, companies being really sensitive about their culture and like having to shape culture through distributed teams now, which is even harder. So it was kind of like seeing the initial opportunity and then kind of riding the wave, I guess. I've gotten feedback from a couple of folks from our old days, who invested in People Inc. and is also invested in Translator, which is super cool. But they've said to me, they're like, I don't know how you've done this twice in your life. Like how you've taken something that you were early, like we were early, Patrick, at People X. Like we were ahead of,
if we could, totally early. Yeah.
We were ahead of the market, and everybody's like, you all are, I mean, I would say words like, people would say we were crazy, right? I mean, that's verbatim what they said. And all of a sudden it looked like we were just riding the wave at the perfect time. And everybody's like, how did you know to do this? And the same thing has happened for this. I mean, 5 years ago, people laughed me out of the room when I was pitching this stuff. But I knew that there was going to be demand for it. And, people would say, well, who are your customers going to be? And I was like, I don't know, Google and Campbell's Soup, like these really big companies that are super progressive. And they're like, yeah, but who else? Like, who else is going to be your customer? And I was like, I just know I have to do this. And now all of a sudden it's like, we have more inbounds than we could possibly handle. Like people have said to me, they're like, I just don't know how you positioned yourself here again. And it's just sort of following my gut and, reading change and also doing what I'm passionate about. And this is way more important. Like, I think our mission at PeopleLinks was like, help salespeople really use social media. Like it was something like, or help people use social media to the best of their ability.
There was like, a few things.
It was a few things as we evolved. But, ultimately it was something along those lines. And, now it's like, how do we scale empathy with technology? Like, how do we make people be a better version of themselves through technology and, allow for them to hear other people's, learn from other people. And that's like the real challenge is like people often, like I always say, like everybody's talking on social media, but like nobody's listening. Like nobody's actually listening anymore. And the reason people a lot of times aren't listening is because they don't understand their own identity first. Like they just live in their own little bubble or vacuum. So we're trying to alter that and trying to help people understand who they are and how they got to where they are, like, became who they are in order to, then give them the awareness to start to be able to understand other people's lived experiences. So that's a lot right there. That's a little bit of the background. I mean, in terms of, what we're up to and how companies are reacting to it today. I mean, it's a good problem to have, and we've got too many people trying to work with us. We don't have enough resources. We've been bootstrapped since, really the beginning. We've raised some money, but never enough to really invest, just enough to keep the lights on. And, lately we've just been client funding. We've been making enough money to keep the lights on and keep running the business. And, but it's become an imperative it's not voluntary. Companies have to do something here. Their employees are demanding it. And the markets are demanding it. I mean, it's also becoming like, a requirement to do business with a lot of companies. They say, look, you can't, our contract is up in a year. And if you don't have a chief diversity officer, if you don't have, an equality statement, if you don't have this amount of spend going to vendors, if you don't have diversity inclusion training programs, like you're going to lose our contract. So now companies are just like freaking out saying we need to do things. And we show up as one of the only companies that has like a digitally driven format to take care of it.
I think maybe like LinkedIn was listening to my conversation with you the other day, or the app was on, or definitely, whatever was happening.
They're always listening.
We got off the our catch up like a week ago, and I was getting an ad. I got an ad from an advertisement from Twitter promoting, and maybe it was Twitter listening, but an advertisement promoting Twitter's diversity and inclusion report. And I thought that was, I mean, strange timing, of course. So they got me, but I didn't click in. I didn't do a good job of that part, but it was interesting to me. So which leads to my next question. I would guess public companies have another level of interest in this type of a solution set for a bunch of other reasons, being public probably the biggest, and the transparency and all the things that they are required to do in hiring and all that. But who are if you segment the market, I guess I have two questions that I'm actually fighting. I've got notes here of like the things I want to ask you. And so two of my questions, and I think maybe you could probably weave these into the same answer or address both together. who needs you guys the most? Like where is the pain where someone's either at the most risk of liability or toxic culture or whatever the case is. And I know there's always the headlines that we see, like there was the guy from Google who wrote a memo about women not being equal counterparts to men like 2 years ago that just went absolutely crazy. And there's always like these headlines, but where, it can't just be these big tech companies. But I'm wondering, that's one question. Then my next question for you is like, what are you doing differently or the same from the way you're taking this to market from PeopleLinks? Like, is there something that you learned from PeopleLinks that is helping you take this to market? Or, and I'm sure there's many little things that add up, but I guess I'm wondering where are you focused at in the marketplace? Where are you seeing the most demand, and how are you taking this to market, or what are you doing differently or better?
Okay, so I'm going to address the first part of the question first, and then just remind me about the second part if I need.
Yeah, they actually might be two completely different questions. I was just merging them to throw you a curveball.
Yeah, no worries. So I think the companies that are most interested in, like, it's very similar to PeopleLinks actually, right? Where like you can segment it at the highest level. There's probably 4 categories. And it's interesting. I think with all disruptive change, especially if it's like pretty serious change, you're going to see the companies with the most amount of money on the line, like going first, right? And I think we saw that at PeopleLinks, like financial institutions were the ones that, were like, we have a long-term challenge here and we have the most amount to lose. And, they're the ones that are also a lot of times the most risk averse. So they're the ones that are trying to figure it out before everybody else. And we're seeing that for sure. Big banks, financial institutions are really investing heavily in DEI at large, and we're part of that process for them. And then, if you think about the waterfall, like soon after, where a lot of the big banks make a lot of their money is off of tech companies, right? Tech IPOs and things like that. So you oftentimes see tech companies, they're sort of, there's a symmetry there where they're kind of working off each other. They're copying what the banks are doing in a lot of ways. So they're fast followers. So we're getting a lot of pickup from the tech space as well. And then I think like third would be professional services. And, those are the 3 kind of categories that I think we worked at most with PeopleLinks. I think the biggest difference for us with Translator is that we're seeing, demand all the way downstream to like very small companies. Not that demand probably wasn't there for small companies at PeopleLinks, but we couldn't service it. So we're seeing, downstream demand all the way to what, we would categorize as like high growth startups and just small organizations, like 100 employees or less. In fact, a lot of our revenue is coming from very small companies because it's easy to get to the CEOs and the COOs, and they can make decisions a lot faster than some of these bigger companies. And the smaller companies, they don't have any resources at all. Like they barely have like HR departments, let alone, DEI solutions, DEI being diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we're kind of like going after the big whales, but there's a faster sales cycle in the smaller organizations, but we are also getting a lot of interest from nonprofits and schools in particular. But because we have so few resources, we can't prioritize going after them. So we kind of focus on like whoever's ready to buy from us. And, it's like, a little bit like roulette. Like we just don't know who's ready to go or who isn't. So, we field a lot of discovery calls and we're trying to figure out who's ready to go. So that's what's up.
Well, I'm in the B2B lead generation business now. So
I feel like you're doing this to try and get our business. Like you're trying to like warm up to us.
Well, is it working? No, I know. Of course, I'm not.
It is working. I need sales reps. I need technology and I need sales reps, which I think kind of goes to the second question. Like, you asked about like, I mean, first of all, I learned all of this from PeopleLinks. Like, there's no way I could be doing what I'm doing. And when we were at PeopleLinks, we had a lot more resources around us. We raised a lot more money. We had, investor advisors that were working with us, rolling up their sleeves and, working with us really to launch like our first clients, like Prudential and things like that. Like when we launched Prudential, Patrick, we had like a wrapper around us with like Kevin O'Neill and Drew Kesey and Andrew Newcomb and like all these people that had already done it before.
Yeah, right? There was candy in the wrapper too.
There was candy in the wrapper. And like, they had already done it. And like this time around, like I'm that person for this really small company. And like, it's really hard, especially when you don't have a lot of resources. And so, we're launching huge clients with like practically no infrastructure and no project management behind it. I mean, it's really, and we're in a lot of ways farther along than we were at People Inc. at this stage, right? Like the way we're handling clients. So it's really interesting to be a part of. I mean, I think one of the things I learned a lot about was the sales process and sales cycles and, expectations there. And I'm sort of always consider myself a salesperson, a selling CEO, whatever you want to call me. But I think right now we're being a lot more disciplined about like when people are coming inbound, we're just really upfront with them about like, hey, we need to understand X, Y, and Z about your budget and your intent. And are you window shopping or are you, and it's challenging because it's an emerging market, right? A lot of times people don't know what they're buying and you have to do evangelistic sales and set them up for next year or the year after. I mean, sometimes it's 2 years. But I think, really understanding that the sales process can make or break a company. And I also really like, I don't care so much, this is going to sound a little funny because you talked about how like much of a perfectionist I am earlier, but I just don't care about the marketing so much. Like, I don't like, to me, like the marketing is an afterthought. Like I'm trying to really test the viability of the product. I mean, even you in early days, Patrick, were like, your website sucks and your name sucks and all these things are problematic. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't matter because it's not really about marketing right now. It's about like understanding whether or not the product actually works and if there's value in the product, and the marketing will come later. And finally, we've started to tighten that up because it does matter. It's not like it doesn't matter at all. But in the early days, I probably would have gotten really in my own way, like obsessed with the marketing and the name and, the brand and the colors. And now it's much more like, those things will follow. And that's changed. I mean, the B2B selling process has changed where now everything is sort of real time. You can make rapid little iteration changes as opposed to like a big reveal, which is how we were taught. And that's how Andy Newcomb taught us how to do it. It's like the big reveal.
Yeah, I mean, just one example too is I think about even the first website at People Inc. and what it took to get website to website was time and costly, and you needed designers and developers and all these things 10 years ago. Now it's like plug and play, drag and drop, and there's other examples of where that's happened. I'm gonna shift a little more into like kind of operational stuff to a degree, and we'll do that for a few minutes, and then I want to let other people ask questions. But there have been many times in the last like year or two where I'm like, I wonder if Natalie will just come as like a hired gun and like help me get some big customers, because you're always good at like pulling the rabbit out of a hat, getting some logo, getting some deal, making, you're a great salesperson. And I always thought about, that, because I'm not the level of salesperson that you are, but I guess from an operational standpoint, do you have things that you maybe still do or have been doing since People Inc., or do you have a couple routines that you do to stay productive as a salesperson? Like, I know you said you got a lot of inbounds, you got some momentum, but what are the one or two activities that you go to, or how do you drive your next deal? Like, how do you get in front of your next customer? What are the activities that you do that get you closing deals? Because obviously you know how to close deals. You can't get around that.
So I think, if you think about the lead generation process for us, we just redid our website like last week, which was like, October or late September, right? And finally updated it so we have like a nice website, but we don't have any SEO. We don't have any social media. Our social media is terrible. I don't think we've like status updated for like 2 years on some of our handles. And we don't have any paid advertising, and it's all been word of mouth. So the word of mouth though is primarily driven by like webinars and conferences. So I get up on stage, I speak, I do demos of the product, and then we get inbounds, right? And that's pretty much how it happens. And it just keeps reinforcing itself. So the more conferences I do, the more people want me to speak at conferences, And the more people tell people about our product, and people reach out and they say, we need that for our organization. So that's how a lot of the lead generation is happening. But again, it's a new market. So people are, as much as I would like to think that they're ready to commit to change and they've got budget, they don't. They're interested, right? They want to know more. They're in discovery mode. They're trying to bring information back to their organizations. And oftentimes they don't have a lot of power, even though they might be really passionate about it. They don't have a lot of power to make decisions. So, a lot of it is just patience, right? It's staying on the field. That's something that we always talked about at People Links, was like, you just got to stay on the field. Like, especially as a market like this is evolving, like the thing that's most likely to like put us out of business is ourselves, right? Like, it's not going to be competition. It's just going to be like, are we going to run out of money because we are just not focused enough to stay on the field? And so staying on the field allows for you to nurture those relationships long-term. But I think the one thing that I do that I learned at People Links and I learned before People Links is just relationship management, right? And it's like, and it's also finding the right people to have relationships with, which can be really hard because like, I want to be friends with like everybody, like, especially in this space, like everyone is super passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like if that's their job, like it's their life. Like they're so passionate about it. So it's not like I'm selling CRM solution to like some CRM buyer that doesn't really actually care about CRM. Like these are people that like their life is on the line. Like it's like what they're most passionate about. So it's real easy to create these really tight connections with them, which is amazing as a sales development kind of mechanism. But the most important thing is just, finding the right people to really be in the right relationships with. And fortunately for us, we've landed a couple of huge accounts that way, and it's taken multiple years, right? You find the right champion, they bring you in quickly, and then they work with you. They become your champion to help build the business case to like continue to do business with you. And if you don't have those champions internally, like it's impossible to sell an emerging product because there's also turnover, right? If you don't have somebody doing the work internally for you, like, and starting a fire, right? Like it's like once they disappear, right? It's like, remember when social media managers, like every time we turned around, they'd be like, oh, I just got promoted and I'm going over to this company over here. Like, and I'm getting paid that much more. So you lose your champion. So here, what's important is that, not only that they're our champion, but they're able to like, create more champions for us internally so that there's like this stickiness to it.
So you touched on on something that also I think is just interesting to me, and it's also interesting because our relationship, even though now it feels very much like honestly it feels the same and as strong as it ever was, but we've had gaps where we haven't talked as much and things obviously have changed. And so, but along that lines, like what else has changed for you as a transgender CEO entrepreneur? Do you find that you get at bats, 10 opportunities? Do people, particularly because of your alignment, I guess I'm just wondering, how much has it changed? Is it an accelerator, a catalyst? Is it a showstopper? Is it making things easier, harder? What has changed for you, whether it be raising money, doing sales? Like, how does that question make you feel? What do you run up against? Talk to me.
Yeah. Great question. That whole question right there could be an hour of content. Everything's changed, right? Like everything has changed. The only thing that really hasn't changed is my knowledge of my previous experiences. But everything else has changed. My management style has changed. My ability to sort of navigate conversation, in particular with investors, has changed. It's significantly harder. Yes, it's easy for me to connect with customers. It's very hard for me to connect with investors, especially investors that have traditionally invested in white, cisgender, heteronormative, I put air quotes around the word normative, males that look like them. Like that's what they want to invest in. That's the pattern. They're used to investing in people that look this way and act this way, and build businesses that look like businesses that they're familiar with. And so when I show up, it's like, an alien like landed in the conference room, right? There's like, we don't even know, like, I can't even process your identity, let alone this business that you're talking about. So it's like a double whammy against me. Like, an entrepreneur has to sell themselves, and then they have to sell the vision of the company. And it's easy when you sell yourself and you look like the people that you're selling to, they're like, yeah, I get it. You look like all my other portfolio CEOs. So I don't look like anything like what they're used to investing in. So I've really run up against a lot of challenges there, and, you know, had to learn again, you know, the hard way, you know, how to get it done. And it's sad too, because I have a lot of experience, right? Imagine a transgender man or woman or non-binary person or a trans woman of color trying to raise money. Like it's, and I have a lot of privilege, right? Like I have a network, I have raised, you know, millions of dollars. I've built a business, and it's still really hard for me. So that's probably the biggest change or challenge, is that, you know, people just don't accept me for who I am, or they take the meeting because they feel like they have to, but they were never going to invest even before I walked in the room.
Okay. I want to, I'm just curious on this. I have to ask you this while you're on that part, which makes absolute sense. And I hadn't even thought about it from that angle, but this one's sort of a fun question because of you. I know it's your, you know, some of your qualities. What has become, is there anything that's become easier that has actually been like a accelerator, like where you connect and it's like,
I mean, it's easier to be me, you know, like that's a huge accelerator for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I really struggled at my whole life, right? Not just at People Inc., but like, I felt like I was putting on a show all the time. You know, I was like, I have to be this person. This is what people want me to be. This is what everybody expects. And it took a lot out of me to perform. I mean, it was very performative. And now I finally get to be me. And like that makes my life easier, but it also makes it harder, right? It's like, it's sort of a double-edged sword. But, you know, I think connecting with people is easier for me. Like, as long as they're open to connecting with me, like I actually can like genuinely connect to people for the first time. And it's not like this thing where I'm kind of like thinking, well, what do they want me to say? You know, I could just be me. And so that's really helped with a lot of my relationships, especially in the space that we're in. I think managing people was initially harder for me because I wanted to bring my old management style to this type of business, which, you know, at least I would summarize it as very command and control. You know, something I learned from my dad and my brothers and from all the successful business people around me was, you know, you need to control everything. And I now really kind of let go a lot of that stuff. I know you could probably razz me a little bit on things that it looks like I'm not controlling when it comes to like this webinar or something. But, you know, for the most part, I'm much more like open. Like I listen a lot more. I don't come into situations like with a decision already made in my head. I'm much more like open to listening. I mean, empathy comes easier for me. Like that's probably the biggest thing is like, and I might've said this earlier, but I confused the word sympathy with empathy my whole life. You know, I actually just, I thought empathy and sympathy were like the same word. And, you know, really, you know, sympathy is like just feeling bad for people. Empathy is like being able to walk in their shoes and feel what they're feeling. And I could never feel what other people was feeling because I had no feelings myself. And so by that has really changed me. And I think ultimately will be a huge driver of the success of this business is because we'll have a culture of empathy, where I think People Links was not a culture of empathy at all. And you know, anyone that's on the call that, you know, especially if they were outside of the you know, what was probably at the time sort of the old boys club, you know, if they were outside of that, it did not feel like an inclusive culture. And, you know, we hoarded things like equity there, you know, like, and ultimately that was the downfall of the company to me. It took me a couple of years to figure it out, but I think we could have navigated a lot of those problems if people were more bought in. But why would they be bought in? I mean, I totally understand it now.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Yeah. I mean, that all points make sense. I totally get it. And I think that the People Link story, though, I think hinges on a couple other details that we can skip over for right now. But I think that there are many factors in that story. I do want to open it up to questions. So I know we've got a few folks from Nerdwise. Coop always has a good one. Other folks on. Any questions from the group? Anybody want to jump in? Ask Natalie something.
Yeah, Patrick, and we have two that are going to be asked publicly to Natalie's, and the first one's coming from Chelsea Pequin. So go ahead, unmute yourself, intro, and ask your questions. Chelsea, you're up to the plate.
Yeah, hi Natalie, I'm Chelsea. I'm an account manager at Nerdwise. So my question for you is, do you feel like the social climate in the last few years, and especially the last few months, do you think it's created any sort of momentum for the business, or have you made any changes to your actual business because of it?
Yeah, great question, and thanks for chiming in, Chelsea. I appreciate it. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, I mean, the last 6 months in particular has been dramatic for us in terms of like an upward swing in our demand and momentum. I mean, I think, COVID in particular, everybody freaked out when COVID happened. I mean, I did too, right, when it started, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. But I think everybody was thinking that diversity and inclusion was just going to like become a non-priority. I had a thought that maybe that wouldn't be the case. But what ended up happening was it all of a sudden became more important, and it became more important in a way that was really challenging, which is like, how do we do this with with distributed teams? Like, how do we create diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging when everybody's working remotely? So our solution just happened to like really fit really nicely into that. And then at the same time, like Black Lives Matter happened, and like all of a sudden, it was this catalyst where for companies that were sitting on the fence, where all of a sudden like, oh God, we have to do something now. Like we were going to do something. We were planning for, 2021 or even beyond. Right. But all of a sudden there's this urgency that people have to like, really show their employees that they're doing stuff. And that's been a huge catalyst for us. I mean, it hasn't changed so much how we're operating, just because we just don't have a lot of resources, and we're just trying to like field as many calls and opportunities as we can. I mean, it's certainly increased the number of inbounds that we've been getting, but it's allowed for us to innovate as well, to like start to look at like solutions to really scale our product to thousands and thousands of employees, where companies are coming and saying we have 50,000 employees that need your solution, which is pretty much the same thing that happened to PeopleLinks. People are like, we started off with these very small scale kind of things, and, KPMG came to us and said, we have 50,000 employees that need this. What are you going to do? And all of a sudden we're in that conversation. So hopefully that answers your question, but.
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we run these lead gen programs for sales teams. I mean, this is a sales pitch. You are on a demo.
It's like a reality sales.
Everyone is going to follow up with you after this. No, but it is interesting, and I mean, I would imagine that during this climate, just there's so many triggers that are keeping people up at night around, if this happens to us, if we have an employee, right? Like there's so many people who just get fired that are the Karens. Some entrepreneur, the Karen entrepreneur from San Francisco, the Karen, the dog walker in New York City. I mean, I feel like now I'm being derogatory, but I'm just using the popular example. And I mean, those are people that they lost everything, from ignorance, a lack of understanding, lack of empathy. But enough about my chiming in. Coop, what else do we have?
Yeah, next on deck is Lamar. So Lamar, if you could unmute, intro yourself, and then ask your question.
Hi. First, I want to give mad respect to you. It's obviously not like an easy road that you've had, but congratulations. It's really phenomenal, and I give you a lot of respect for that.
Thank you, Lamar.
Yeah, of course. Welcome to the womanhood. It's a fun place to be.
Yeah.
So the question that I have is, do you feel like the company and the people that you work with who use your services are actually learning empathy and putting it into practice in their lives and in the companies? Or do you feel like it's more just so people, because of all these social movements, it's just for people to like check off the DEI box and to like say, oh yeah, this is what we're doing, working with translation?
Yeah, so I think I wouldn't be doing this if we weren't making a difference, right? I mean, I wouldn't. And I think that that is evident in the sort of word of mouth experience that we get, where people say like, this worked for me. I'm recommending it to other people. Like, that's not something we're like, really facilitating. It's just happening. And the stories that we get back from people are like, look, this really changed my life. It's changing how I see the world today. I'm going to make a change today because of what I've experienced by working with you all. And so that's kind of the fuel for me to keep doing this. Cause like, otherwise I just like, I mean, honestly, I have better things to do with my life. Like I've got to take care of my family. I've got kids, I've got to like take care of myself. And, there's a lot of cost to this, like it costs me like, a lot of my personal time just to like, to try and get a company off the ground. So yes, it does make a difference. I think there are companies out there that are certainly just checking the box, or at least at the highest levels they are. But I think those are opportunities to like, it's almost like Trojan horse, right? Like companies are always just made up of people. And even in some of those companies, there's good people, right, that want to make change. They just might not be able to make the change that we all want to see. But it's an opportunity to get inside. And so we always take those opportunities just to get in and start creating awareness. And, they might not be the most high value customer immediately, but like we can start to incrementally make that change. And, that's rewarding as well, right? Because even in some of those companies, you get people coming back to you and saying, like, I love what you all are doing. Like, I want to help and bring this to my department. And I've got, a small amount of budget to do it on the side. But, more and more companies are realizing they can't just check the boxes, right? Like there's a transparency that they have to have with their employees, with their boards of directors, with the markets. Like it's got to be real. And I think that's, that transparency is separating the CEOs and the leadership that are, just doing this for show. And I just think, the cost of losing employees today is too great, right? Companies are realizing like they need to do something in order to retain the best and brightest, talent. And that's diversity. Like that's, you need to have people with different ideas and different backgrounds, coming together to make decisions. And, again, I think that's one of the sort of challenges we had at People Links was like, it was pretty much like all like very similar people, right? There was not diversity around decision making, right? Like it was sort of like everybody was like jockeying each other and saying like, yeah, I like your idea. Well, of course you like your idea because you're just like me, right? And so by having diversity, you're hedging risk. Like the more diverse perspectives you have at the table, like the more chance that somebody's going to say like see something that nobody else could see. So companies can't afford to not do it anymore. Great
Do you find, well, I mean, I have other questions.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Do you find that there are a lot of companies that are really open to that and are really pushing for that? Like, or have you worked with certain companies that like have had a lot of challenge with, I guess, opening their perspective towards DEI?
Yeah, I mean, we there's a lot of companies that have a lot of challenge. There's a lot of risk, like that they see as like, if we do something, what if it goes wrong, right? Like they're like, or, if we do this and we offend somebody, what does that mean, right? Mm-hmm. So that's like a big issue. And we just dealt with that last week with a pretty big client. We had to work with them. They did all this due diligence on us. Like it was like almost like they were investing in us. Like they were calling our customers, doing references and, just like really kind of hemming and hawing about doing something because they were scared to do something. And they were, again, just worried. There was all these what ifs. But the problem is if they do nothing, like there's also incredible risk in doing nothing these days. And I think that most companies are realizing like if we do nothing, we actually are like the level of exposure, the level of risk is even higher.
Totally.
So we're starting to see that a lot of those companies that are even super conservative, like the company that I can't say their name, but this company that we worked with last week is this really high-end, very elite, very conservative search firm that does like executive recruiting research, like probably one of the biggest in the world. And like their clients are super conservative, right? Like their clients are like, would be upset if they found out if they were doing this kind of stuff, like to kind of frame it. But they realize that they have to, and if they don't do it, it's actually like going to be worse for them. But we had to like coach them through that whole process. And like, honestly, I probably wouldn't have done it if my internal buyer wasn't such a like incredibly fierce like ally and champion, and also a friend. I mean, she saw me speak at an event. You know, she worked for that company and eventually brought us in there. And it was like months and months and months of a sales cycle. And, you know, there was fighting internally. Like, well, should we do this? Should we not do this? At one point she texted me and she's like, our jobs are on the line about this. Like literally we might actually get fired if this doesn't go well, but I'm going to push forward because I believe that we have to do it. And it's it's going to go well, but B, if it doesn't go well, then we need to, I don't want to be a part of this organization that like can't handle that. So,
yeah.
It's definitely challenging. A great question.
Yeah. I mean, I have like more questions, but I don't know if other people do, so I don't want to take up all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm here for all of you. So I have questions too. I can ask you all questions.
Well, maybe you guys can take that offline, take it on offline, then back online. But Coop, are there other and maybe back online shortly? But other questions, Coop, from yourself or from others?
There are.
Coop's the MC, by the way.
Yeah, there are a couple.
Hi, Natalie. It's Robert.
Hi, Rob. I was going to say hi to you, but I didn't want to like interrupt the flow or embarrass you. But hi, it's so good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
How are things?
Good. I got a wife and 2 kids now, just in the grind every day. So
Nice.
doing diapers and cash flow analysis.
It's like diaper flow.
Do you happen to have a question? Because I do have two lined up. But if
No, answer questions. I was just saying hey.
Well, Natalie, this one's coming from Ashley Havanis, who runs our inside sales here at Nerdwise. And her question is, Natalie, who is currently inspiring you, whether it be other entrepreneurs, maybe authors, books you're currently reading, podcasts that you listen to, or any other source of inspiration, so everyone else here on the line can also learn and benefit from those resources as well?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you asked that question because I got that question last week and I was like sort of caught off guard. I was like, oh my God, I don't know.
Now you know. It should be like 1, 2.
Well,
3.
I know, but the reason is because, and I'm just being honest because I really thought about it afterwards. I was like, I should be more prepared. Like after the question was asked, I was like, I should be more prepared and like have a list of people. And I was like, but the truth is like, I'm so heads down that I don't actually focus on like what that many other people are doing. Like what I ended up doing when I answered that person's question was like regurgitating other people that I know that like other people say are inspiring, and I don't necessarily want to do that. But I'm hugely inspired by like the people that like you would never like know, right? It's like the people that you don't see. They're not necessarily writing books. They don't have podcasts. Like, I mean, I'm just being really honest. I don't have time to read books. I don't have time to like listen to podcasts. Like I don't attend other people's sessions. Like I just don't have time. I'm just so consumed with what I'm doing. But I am hugely inspired by these people around me, these like sort of, you know, little, I don't want to call them little people because it sounds sort of demeaning, but they're like relatively speaking, like they're just the people oftentimes that are like suffering, right? It's like the people that, you know, I know that we're doing this work for. And so I know that's like, I don't know how that could be read by you all, but I mean, I think you have to be inspired by the people that you're helping. And like that to me is the ultimate fuel. I mean, outside of that, there's a handful of entrepreneurs that have really changed my life. And they absolutely inspire me. But the reason that I would say my experience of them is more just sort of like a one-on-one thing. Like there's a woman named Kelly Khalil who is on our board of directors. And when I first transitioned, like she just took me under her wing, like no questions asked, like, you know, and I couldn't even understand why she would do that. Like I was actually kind of blown. Like it was actually didn't trust her. Like I was like, why, like, what do you want from me? Like, what are you trying to get from me that you would do this? And she like let me sleep on her couch for months and months in New York City when I was looking for a place. You know, she helped introduce me to all these people in New York City. You know, she just really took care of me, and she is a hustler. I mean, she's like, you know, but you know, she's just kind of a, you know, she's a tech CEO for sure, but she's not like writing podcasts or doing anything that, you know, influentially you all would be able to pick up on, except for the fact that she just really went out of her way to help me, you know, and it like fueled me to like want to help more people and like be unconditionally helpful of people. You know, I was so suspicious that she was like trying to like better her own career or her life or something through, working with me, which, certain people had been doing, but not her. And mostly like a lot of women that I've encountered, like just really wanted to help me. So I think women inspire me incredibly because they're just so, many of them are so like empathy oriented, and like they just want to help people unselfishly. And like that was a really hard concept for me to understand. But if you really want names, I would look at like Brene Brown. Like she's amazing. She does a lot of TED Talks and things like that. I haven't seen them, but I've heard that they're great. And Shavara Oren is one of our consultants. She's amazing. CHEVARRA. Oren is ORRIN. She's amazing. And she does a lot of work on like, racial inequality and social injustice. But I don't even know how much she's podcasting or writing. She just really inspires me.
Cool. Coop, any other questions from the group?
Yeah, this one could be from me because I don't think any have been written in. And, Natalie, it's just, what was it that was your aha moment or your breaking point where you said, enough is enough? I'm here to stand up, shed this body of armor that I've been kind of encrusted with in, your own way. And I'm going to try to do something to make a change to better these corporations, to better these people, and to set a standard of empathy that has been it's been long neglected for far too long. What was, and hopefully it's not too personal, but like, was there a aha moment or a breaking point where you said, enough is enough? It's time for someone to stand up and represent this community and really divulge into a world of creating this DEI software and leveraging empathy at a higher level?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of sort of like moments along the way that led to this one, but what I always tell people is like the sort of the moment that I came up with Translator, like, and sort of put a stake in the ground, for lack of a better word, and said I'm going to do something about this, it was like very early in my transition. Like I'd come out, which by the way was like almost 5 years ago to the date, right? So like October, I think it was like October 12th or something like that of 2015 is when I figured this out. But I was standing in a Starbucks and I had this really nasty altercation with another customer. Like I was standing in line and I was like sort of put into a situation where I was forced to talk to them, and I tried to make small talk and they like said the nastiest thing that you could possibly imagine to me. Like it was like a dagger through my heart, and then like twisting it and laughing and spitting on me on the way down. Like it was so horrific. Like I just felt so disrespected. And I remember watching them walk out of the Starbucks thinking to myself, like, if they only knew my story, like if they only like knew how hard I've worked my whole life to try and fit in, and like what I've done, not just to try and fit in, but like what I've done to other people. Like if they knew, like I've hurt so many people on the way. Like if they knew what I've done to try and fit in, they wouldn't judge me this way. And that was sort of the light bulb moment for me where I was like, oh my God, like that's the problem. Like how could they understand my story? Right? Like, I mean, we've been on this call now for like a little bit over, 45 or 50 minutes. And like, we're not even scratching the surface of my story. And so I sort of thought to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, right? Like that's the issue. Like we need technology to help people understand each other's, stories, to help us understand each other better. And so that was sort of the moment where I was like, I'm going to do something about this, right? I'm going to use my privilege, my experience, my passion, and just, put it all into building technology to help us understand each other better. But what I realized pretty quickly is that like, while storytelling is like the key to empathy, as I said earlier, like oftentimes we can't hear each other's stories because we're so, like we're just programmed to not hear, it's like, I hate trans people, or I don't like Black people, or people that are overweight or that do have these things, they have issues. And like, I'm just not I can't see past them. Right. Because they've been taught those things. And by the way, I grew up like hating the trans community. Like I was taught that, right? I was taught to make fun of the trans community, the LGBT community, like anybody that was different than me, I was taught that growing up. And all of a sudden I realized, I was like, wow, if we need to unlearn what we've learned, like we have to start off with self-awareness. And so that was like, became like the technology sort of foundation was like, we're going to teach people self-awareness at scale. And that was 5 years ago. And, it started off, just a lot of, just sort of pencil and paper or, just ideas. And I started sharing that idea with people and saying, hey, what do you think? What if we built technology that would do this? And, people would give me more and more feedback and say, yes, and it needs to do these things and those things. And eventually we had sort of wireframes and some original concepts. And about a year later, honestly, the Trump administration took over, and it became the catalyst for all of this, right? I mean, all the companies that we've been talking to doing research to say like, hey, here's wireframes, here's what this product could do and what it could look like. All of a sudden, everybody that we've been talking to is like, hey, that thing that you showed us last year, like, we need you to build that, because they felt threatened that, diversity and inclusion was going to be threatened by the administration, which in a lot of ways it is doing literally actually in the moment, right? I mean, they're talking about like banning diversity and inclusion training, right? Like, it's like they're banning it at the federal level, and that's just the beginning. So companies were hungry to like, counter that with technology, and we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. So.
Well, Natalie, thank you for scratching that itch and going deeper, because I do feel across the board that there's such a superficialness to our society and culture based on social media that if you go an inch further or a foot further deeper into that conversation, you're going to understand somebody's story and their background better. You're going to de-escalate certain situations that might otherwise escalate and be aggressive. So thank you for taking it, further and creating this type of software, because I do think and feel that it's a fundamental flaw in our culture and society, and that empathy is something that should be leveraged for an opportunity instead of seen as like something you should tuck and hide and like run away from. So just thanks for being here, being strong, and just making that change.
Yeah, no worries. It was great to be here. Thank you, Patrick, for putting this on. And thank you to everybody for joining. It's great to see some old faces, Rob and Coop and Mike Fracas. Good to see you. I can't see your face, but it's good.
Natalie, did I just hear a little bit of Mike Fracas, or was that Rob?
Man, that was me. That was Mike.
Mike, good to hear your voice, man.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Mike was one of the original interns at PeopleLinks, and yeah, anyway, I mean, there's always more to talk about. Natalie, it is great to have you here. It's great to see you and catch up. Thanks for sharing your story and things that we covered. I mean, I really, like I said, it feels like, it feels like our relationship is right where it always was. It's just been a while and things have changed, but great to see you and catch up. I would say my last thing would be like, is there a tip, thought, like kind of a thing that you can leave us with that we could do better, or kind of like, do you have some sort of, do you have a catchphrase for Translator or something that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I mean, thank you actually for the opportunity to share that. I mean, I think the one thing I always tell people is like, well, there's two things, but one is language matters, right? Like hashtag language matters. And what I mean by that is like everything happens through language, right? Like whether it's spoken language or written language or our body language, or even like, coding language, like, everything happens through language. And if you buy into that, which you should, and we could have a big conversation about that, like if everything happens through language, then language matters, right? The things that we say, the things that we do, all those little things matter. And, it's a part of being self-aware, right? It's a part of, becoming, an ally and becoming a champion for those that have less than you or less than us, right? So I think, in terms of like potentially, creating a lot of allies here today with this conversation, like I would tell you, like, that's a great, like, foundational step is like language matters. And my other one is that representation matters, right? And this episode is about representation. So I just want to thank you for that, because we need the voices of those that are like not always represented to be out there to provide hope and, courage to other people to be themselves, whatever that is, like whatever version of it is that they are, right? And it's not always about gender. It's about, all kinds of things. So I appreciate the opportunity to represent today. And I would encourage you all to kind of really look into that, that phrase around language matters, and learn about allyship so that you can, help those that don't have as much as you do. We all have a lot, by the way. So that's it.
Awesome.
Thank you, Patrick.
Natalie, no, thank you, and thanks for the time and for everything. It's been great, and now I think we've reopened a line of communication that, I mean, it had probably been 2 or 3 years. I mean, but not for any real reason, just doing.
Just saying hi, and now we're formally connected. And Rob, Mike, anyone on the line, I'm here for you. I'll continue the conversation. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or Instagram is more my jam. So it's Natalie J Egan on Instagram, and then my email is natalie@translator.company. Natalie@translator.company.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
All right, thank you all. I'm going to sign off.
Cheers.
All right,
Later, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.